to share something very important that he shared with me over the break. So stay with us. It's about another 40 minutes, and then you'll be able to move on and enjoy the rest of the evening. Robert, can you share that point, because I think it's important. We won't really get to it in the presentation today.
Yeah, no, basically what I was saying is that in a one-on-one sales presentation, oftentimes it's really critical to ask questions. But more importantly, from the questions, what you're actually trying to do is determine what sort of personality you're dealing with. Because you have different types of personalities. So you have a driver who wants everything right away, he wants all the information, and he wants you to stay 5 minutes and then you're out of there. And then you have the amiable character who is going to be, he wants you to talk to them a little bit more, get him to relax. He doesn't mind you spending the next half an hour just going through everything. So that first few minutes that you're asking the questions, you're trying to also identify what kind of personalities you're dealing with, because your presentation is going to be structured in that way to make it more successful to that personality. And that's basically what I was actually indicating.
And I think it's a very powerful point, Robert. And it was something I meant to say at the beginning about children. Very young children, as we said, are good salespeople and good negotiators. And a lot of it is because they don't have the verbal skills to be asking a lot of probing questions. But what are they doing all the time? They're observing you. They're observing how the parents react to different things, right? And they tailor their approach to you based on that. And Robert's absolutely right. In terms of personality psychological profiling, we have people who are more introverted, and they usually are the ones who really kind of want you to kind of get to the point, and they want you to give them detail. The extroverts like the rapport, like a chat. They might even give you a cup of coffee when you come in, and that's important to them because they really need to feel that rapport. The drivers, not so much. They want to figure out really quick, do you know what you're talking about? And they're often the people, when you go in, they'll say, look, I'm running late. I have half an hour at most. And you'll be out of there in 15 minutes if they think you're rubbish in the first 5 minutes. But if they think you know what you're at, you could actually get an hour out of them, right? But you have to prove yourself to them. So very important point, Robert, around being very observant as well as asking the right questions. So thank you for sharing that. And if we were doing role plays, as we would in a workshop, we would set it up that way, where we'd have people selling to someone who was in introverted mode, somebody who's in extroverted mode, and so on, and you get to feel it and see it live. Okay. So moving on, these are just some productivity goals that salespeople often have. They have to increase sales across key categories. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're selling products, you might have 5 or 6 different categories of products that you're selling. Or you might be selling into different categories of clients, small, medium, and large clients, all who have different needs. And your company might want you to get a percentage growth, a specific percentage growth in each of those areas. So that would be one productivity target you might have. If you're also responsible for collecting outstanding accounts, you might have to reduce those, and so on. I don't need to go through them all. The point here is, I was trying to give you an idea of all of the different things you've got to take care of, perhaps in the round of a week. It's quite a lot, so as you can imagine, you really need to get organized, and you need to have a sales plan. Okay? So earlier I mentioned the whole thing around selling features versus benefits, okay? And this is really important. You have to, through the questioning process, identify the need. Only then can you actually figure out what the benefit is of the product you're going to sell. So that's kind of number one up front. Sales target analysis. So I'm sure you do this, Dean, sorry, Dave. So if you've got X number of sales to make in the round of a week, you've figured out how many phone calls maybe you have to make in order to get X number of meetings. in order to be able to send out a proposal or get a presentation and make the sale. So, depending on what business you're in, to make one sale, you might have to make 10, 20 phone calls a day in order to get maybe 6 meetings a week, maybe to get 3 proposals out of that, and maybe to get 2 sales out of that. It is a numbers game. And so it requires getting organized and really putting the effort in. Okay? For those of you who are in, sorry, Will.
Just also, it's interesting that, you know, the successful salespeople actually do monitor their calls, their you know, and the reality is I work with many salespeople that are just a bunch of fluff. You know, they'll tell you, oh yeah, I tried to make those phone calls and try to get somebody, just no, I couldn't get anybody on the line. And you know, I find the successful people, they're good chatters, but then when you get down to the brass tacks of saying, how many calls did you make?
Yes.
You know, how many stops did you make? You know, they can't get the specifics.
Right, right. And that's where like a good sales manager can help, because a good sales manager can help keep us focused. Because I've got another slide here that I'll come to, and it really shows how much resilience and stamina you have to keep going if you're doing a lot around phone calling and that. You know, it's not for the faint-hearted, but you've just got to stick with it. Okay? So, your role is to represent your company in a particular area and to call on your prospects and customers to sell products and so on. Okay? And you're there to meet or exceed the target you've agreed to. And here I'm just saying, in some cases, you need to make 6 to 10 phone calls per day in order to get 6 new prospects, in order to get new clients, okay? And I've categorized clients here as A, B, and C accounts. You will have already, Dane, say, within your portfolio, you will have existing clients that are really good clients, maybe that have been with you for a while. And there's a huge element of relationship management going on there. And sometimes you just call them to say, hi, how are you doing? How's everything going? Blah, 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 blah. Your B accounts are ones that you've identified that have huge potential. You may have gotten in there on some small things, but you know they have a lot of needs. So there's massive potential there. So you really want to mine, M-I-N-E. You really want to mine those. The guys in commodities over here will understand that. And your category C accounts are maybe the ones that you spend the least time on, because you figure you're going to get a lot more out of B and A. Okay, so again, just to show you that as a salesperson, there's a lot of organizing to be done of your day. So if you come in on any given day, let's say you have 8 hours, how are you going to spend those 8 hours? And how much time do we lose doing things that are not going to drive us towards making these targets? By the way, just to say, Nikita is going to send out this presentation to everybody anyway, so you'll be able to recap on it. Okay, so I would suggest, and we'll send you out a time analysis worksheet as well. I would suggest that you take the time analysis sheet that you get sent out, you print off 5 copies of it, and you literally follow the instructions and log what you're doing every day. How are you spending your 8 hours? And you'll be amazed what happens, right? We go from one thing to the next. Sometimes we're not finishing, we're not completing, or we're spending way too long maybe talking to a colleague or whatever. But at the end of the day, that's going to damage your prospects of actually making your sale. So things like phone calls, you need to group them. So one of the things I used to do was, I knew that in the morning I was very fresh, and sometimes I would make my phone calls within a 1 hour span there while I was up and energetic. But other times, if it was after lunch and I was feeling low, and I knew I wasn't going to maybe write that proposal because I was like this, sometimes that's the time when I would make myself get on the phone and make the calls, because the minute you start talking to another human being, what happens? It energizes you, exactly. And I would literally consciously do that. And a great tip I got as a young salesperson was, if you're feeling low on energy, stand up to make the phone call. Because actually it changes what you're projecting down the other end of the phone. So don't mind if people in the office are laughing at you. Stand up and make that call. It will be worth it. So you enter into the sheet on an hourly basis exactly what you're doing. So we give a sample in the handout. We give a sample of a salesperson who came into work at 8:50 in the morning, left at 6. He did check his sheet in every hour, but it was 11:30 before he left the office. So he had used up about, I think, 3 hours of his selling time in the morning when he was fresh. He made 3 sales calls, one of which was a presentation, which he sold, but he had been kept waiting for half an hour by the client. This can happen a lot. You'd be surprised. Because these appointments were not planned, in this case, this person was spread out over a wider territory, and what we found was he was kind of going back and forth instead of trying to get his calls all in the same area on a given day. There will be exceptions, you won't always be able to do that. But what was possible by actually analysing his time sheets, we were able to see that he had about 9 hours, right? But, he only had 3 effective hours where he was actually in front of clients and doing sales work, even though he worked 9 hours, okay? And that's kind of scary when we do that exercise. Another thing that can happen when we allow our day to kind of run away from us is we can end up working late. I mean, I know people in this island who are in their offices at 7, 8, and 9 o'clock at night. And I'm sorry to say, but it's gross inefficiency. That's what it is. It's really poor time management. And the downside of that is the person will either burn out, get really demotivated, or will get into big trouble with their partners at home, and rightly so. So every time I waste a half an hour of my working day, I'm taking it away from my partner if I have one, for when I get home. Right? And I'm not going to arrive home either in good form if I'm working until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. It's not effective. So the wonderful thing though for this guy was he really learned a lot from that, and he started to get much more focused on his time, and he wouldn't let people steal his time anymore, and he stopped interrupting himself as well, which is another thing we do. So you need to plan, set priorities, have daily goals, and review. I realize, I have to say one thing, Robert, it links back into what you were saying about personality types. I'm a particular personality type. I'm an ENTJ, very kind of militaristic. I think the descriptor for it in the Myers-Briggs is lieutenant. And so all of this structure and discipline suits my persona anyway and makes me feel safe. It actually makes me feel secure because it's like I've created my boundary that I can operate in. So I'm not saying you should follow everything here slavishly. I think you need to adapt it a little bit to your own persona. But there is a benefit, because I really did see this, I think, early on as a rookie salesperson, that it was the salespeople who were disciplined and structured were the ones who outperformed everybody else. And it wasn't always the chatty ones that did great. To make 1 sale per day, you may need to make 3 sales presentations to get that. In turn, you might need 10 leads, right, to get those 3 sales presentations. You might need to make 20 phone calls a day in order to get 10 good leads. Can you see where this is going? Yes. And so anything that sidetracks you from those 20 calls might be a waste of time, okay? Your goals will lose their power to motivate you unless you keep a score. Now again, that suits my persona. I'm a list maker and I love going tick, tick. In fact, I like to do a double tick and I get something done. It makes me feel good. I'm a bit mental, but it is nice to see when you're making progress. So the time logs that we'll send you will help highlight your weaknesses and show where you need to concentrate. But it'll also highlight your strengths, where you're doing really well. Because that guy, remember, could see, that's a real guy. He could see that when he did have his 3 hours in front of his customers, he made the sales. We're never going to make the sales from our desk. We've got to get out in front of people. Okay. Now, how many of you have heard of the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule? Yeah? That's another really helpful thing to keep in mind. So, if you look, again, sorry to keep coming back to it. If you look at if you have 20 customers, you'll probably find that 80% of the revenue generated is coming from about 20 to 30% of them.
Well, it's the same thing. I was just about to tell you that I read that in the book, and it actually was a sales book. And it's pretty much in our life. Like in our closet, we're 20% of 80% of our closet. So
we only wear 20% of what's in our closet.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
That is true actually.
So
yeah.
it's real. That's where we get most of our sales from.
The real value of this, the benefit, if you like so what, right? The benefit of showing you this is, if you have 20 prospects or 20 clients, you need to look at them, and if you look at your existing client base and identify the profile of the type of company that gives you the most revenue, like maybe they have a certain staff size, certain turnover in revenue, maybe a particular type of business sector or whatever, wouldn't it make sense to kind of hone in on them if 80% of your revenue is already coming from there, rather than dispersing your energy and your time across clients that just don't seem to be buying? There's a message going on there, okay? Sorry, did you want to ask something? No. So again, as well, 80% of your referrals come from 20% of your contact list. That's also really important. There are some clients that are brilliant at giving referrals, and then there are others that don't. So this, again, is all about working smart, using our time intelligently. I think most people in this room, if you're in sales, you're not a lazy person, because you wouldn't survive in sales if you're lazy. Most of us work very hard. What we need to do is work much smarter to get the most out of our time and our effort. And I think that really makes this point. So questions would be, do you know who your top clients are in value to you? And do you look after them well? Because guess what happens? Often our most troublesome clients are the ones who actually do the least business with us, right? Because usually the clients that are big customers of ours that are spending a lot of money with us, they tend to be reasonably well organized people themselves. They're not going to waste your time because they don't have time to waste. It's the ones who are kind of piddling around at the bottom often are the ones who are eating up your time, right? So again, I think there's a message there. So you should be able, if I say to you, who are your top 10 clients, you should be able to rattle them off. Do these clients take relatively little time to look after, and are the clients who are the most troublesome also the most valuable? Absolutely not. Stay away from them. So you need to, every day, get off to a quick start. Like I said, get up a half an hour. The early bird catches the worm. Get up an hour earlier than everybody else. Get in, get at it. You got to know your business sector that you're selling. You've got to really understand what their needs are. So, Alec, you were saying to me earlier on, Alec is in the whole area of physical gold on island. So there'll be certain categories of clients that are prospects he could go after, and there's a whole lot of people. It'll be a total waste of your time, I imagine, going after. So for you, this is really important to know your category and know what to focus on. And then to work that systematically, which is the point Will was making. If I come in today and I do a great job, but the next 2 days I hardly do anything, and that's not going to work. I'm actually defeating myself by that approach. And don't prejudge the worth of any customer. That's a big mistake. Estee Lauder, how many of you here have heard of Estee Lauder? Very successful businesswoman. One of the key things she used to always say to the sales assistants who were selling her products in stores was, because they thought their prospects were all the fancy women who were already very fancy and posh, but the women who spent more money on Estee Lauder products were the farmers' wives. The farmers' wives. And they wouldn't get into town that often, but when they came, it was a special outing for them. And she taught her staff to make a big fuss of them. And they were the big spenders. Don't judge the book by the cover, but ask the right question. Okay, it's very important to keep your notes on your prospects and your customers. You don't want to do a lot of research work and then be footling around looking for it. Have everything to hand. Do your paperwork. I'm not going to go through all of these because we won't have the time, but paperwork, obstacles to success. I suppose nobody here ever puts off until tomorrow what they could do today. I've done that once or twice. Despite my mother beating it in my ear numerous times not to do that. It's something, if you find that you do put certain things off, what you find is there's a pattern. Different people will put off different things. And if you find what it is that you're inclined to put off, do it first. Get it out of the way. Or eat it like we'd eat an elephant, bite by bite. So you do a little bit, you schedule in time to get at it if you're writing a proposal or a report or whatever it is. But don't let it drift. Controlling interruptions. Either when we interrupt ourselves, I'll just go down there for a quick cup of coffee. But then I meet Marianne on the way, and I talk to her about Bohemian Rhapsody. And then, on the way down, I meet John or something, and I talk to him about something else. And by the time I get back to my desk, I've forgotten what I was working on, and I have to get back, and I got to reorient myself again. Or I'm bored at my desk, and I think, I'll phone Robert, because I need a laugh, I need to hear a joke. But actually, I'm on a timeline, and I really need to get something done. And it's important to put things in writing, especially in sales. You've got to, if you're finally agreed and you've got a contract, especially in certain types of selling, in the financial services sector where you're dealing a lot one-on-one with people and you're maybe dealing with their life savings and so on and so forth, it all has to be documented. So until we can manage our time, we can manage nothing. A bit self-obvious, I know, self-evident, but it's something we're all working on. And so you have to start by prioritizing, organizing, delegate if you have someone to delegate to have your to-do list, stay focused, and then get busy, get active. Okay? And it's again, Will said this earlier on, it's important to evaluate and review your own productivity on a regular basis. How am I doing? Right? So, do I manage my territory? Do I categorize my customers? There's a lot of good stuff in this that Nikita will send out to you. I told her not to print them off because I know what a lot of us do when we get a handout. We think, well, we'll get to it, but we don't. But when you get this, you get it in your email. Try and put a little bit of time aside over the next month to actually go back through it and put your own plan together. Okay? So setting priorities is really important. Decide what is urgent versus important. Anything that's urgent in your life has a time deadline to it. Anything that's important means that it is going to impact your life, but the deadline is a little bit of ways off. What happens most of us is we procrastinate, and everything that's in our important box ends up in our urgent box, and then that's why we get stressed. Okay, so quite important to set your priorities, know what they are, and stick with them. So, any questions so far before I go on to prospecting? You all riveted and excited around time management. That was really exciting, wasn't it? But you know what, guys? If you actually do it, you will get excited. You will, because you will get more focused, and you will get much better results. So, what is a prospect and what is a lead? A really good prospect is somebody who might become a prospect, providing they meet the other two criteria. So when you're making those phone calls, in the beginning you don't know whether it's a lead or a prospect, but you have to find out what is it they need, and you have to find out how they budget for it. Okay? Our study concludes that this is the percentage of our customers who will buy from us without any effort whatsoever on our part. Well, maybe once in a lifetime you might stumble across somebody who would buy off you just because they were desperate or something, but I wouldn't want to be depending on it. This goes back to some of the comments earlier on about resilience and about really sticking with it. What the research shows is when you're making those prospecting calls, if you like, 43% of salespeople give up after the first call. You know, if they get the first no, or nobody answers the phone, or the secretary won't put them through, they give up.